Today I want to talk to you guys about choices and compromise. Now we all have choices in our lives. We can choose to eat chicken at Chick-fil-A. We can choose to eat beef. We can choose to eat or drink soda or milk. Every day we're faced with choices. We can choose to drink Monster, or we can choose to drink the little 5-ounce energy drinks. Whatever it is, we all have choices, and we come across them every day. For some of us guys, some of us more sports guys, and I'm sure girls as well, we have huge choices in this month, March Madness. Which team is going to win? Which team is going to go to the Final Four? Are you a North Carolina fan? Duke? Memphis? Louisville? Purdue? All the way. Michigan? Hopefully not. I mean, whatever. Michigan works.
I'm still great, baby. I'm still great.
Michigan works. The point, though, with choices is that with every choice that you make, there's also a result or an action that follows that choice. You guys might not know this about me, but I used to be a toothpick. I was very, very skinny. If you saw pictures of me, I was tall and skinny. But I made a choice one day to go to Buffalo Wild Wings. And since that day, we just ate boneless honey barbecue wings. Since that day, yeah, the choice has made me a little bit bigger. But that was a result of the choice that I made to go to Buffalo, to eat more food. I got bigger. I want to tell you guys 2 stories today. The first story is about a guy who made a choice that had a negative effect. The second story is about a guy who chose, and his effect brought him to a place with God that few of us have ever seen. The first story is found in 1 Samuel chapter 13. It's the story of King Saul. It's 1 Samuel 13, verses 8 through 14. As you're turning there, let me give you a little bit of background on this story, where it's coming from. At this time, Israel is a young nation. Up to this point, they've had judges and prophets that have been the rulers of Israel at that time. King Saul is a new king. He's young. He just got placed into this position because the people of Israel at that time looked around and saw the other countries having a king, and so they wanted one. Saul, being a young king at this time, he wanted to prove himself. And so that reason and the other reason being that the Philistines at that time were attacking Israel, went to war against the Philistines. Back then, when a country went to war against the Philistines, the prophet or the priest at that time first got together and offered a sacrifice for the sins of the people to repent. And this is where we pick up the story in verse 8. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings." And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. "What have you done?" asked Samuel. Saul replied, "When I saw that the men were scattering, and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I sought the Lord's favor. Skip there. I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer this burnt offering." "You acted foolishly," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command of the Lord your God. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people, because you have not kept the command of the Lord." You see, Saul in this situation, he had a choice to make. He could wait on Samuel to offer this burnt offering to repent for the sins of the people, or he could do it on his own. It's interesting, I think, in this particular passage that Saul went halfway. He knew that he needed to repent for the sins of the people, but he wasn't willing to make that choice to wait for Samuel to come. He made a compromise. He went halfway. He didn't keep all the command of the Lord. He just kept half of the command of the Lord. The result of that was the kingdom was taken away from him. And as you know today, if you're in Sunday school or anything like that, when we think of the King Saul, we don't think of this great king of Israel. When we think of Israel and the great kings of Israel, we think of King David. And it was merely because of one small compromise early on in his kingdom that led to many other compromises for the rest of his life. The second story I want to talk to you about today is about a young man named Daniel. If you want to turn in Daniel chapter 1, verses 3 through 20. Let me go ahead and read the first couple of verses here. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. Lots of kings at this time, once they conquered a country, they would take the young men and women from the royal family, and they would take them back to the country, in this case, to Babylon, and they would raise them up and influence them with their culture. And then they would take them and place them as rulers or governors over the country that they had conquered, thus culturizing them, if you want to use that word. Let's read on. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among these were some men from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief officials gave them new names. To Daniel the name Belshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. That was also part of the culture change. They wanted to change their names so that they could be fully converted. Verse 8, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief officials for permission not to defile himself in this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel, but the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking any worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. Here Daniel was faced with a decision. He could choose to eat the royal food and meat. It's important also to note that in this time, as a young Jew, and even as an old Jew, Jews could not eat pork or meat that was unclean at that time. We're not really sure whether this meat was pork. It could have been hamburger. Also, this meat and wine in this passage was offered to God before it was served to the people of the royal table. So Daniel, knowing that if he ate this would defile himself before God, had a decision to make. And this is where we pick it up. Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead.